So today you wanted to speak about imperfection, which, needless to say, is a topic I'm quite unfamiliar with.
Well,
Just joking.
hopefully by the end of today's podcast, we will have revealed that there is ways that we are all imperfect. And we'll have hopefully as well found some practical avenues to actually start uncovering those imperfections.
Yes, because imperfections are not necessarily something bad, something to be avoided, right? There's something to be, well, celebrated almost, transcended.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of the great paradoxes of being the type of creature we are, being a human being, is that in some way we are outside of, we've stepped out of the animal kingdom. We've stepped out of the natural world in some way. We're still fundamentally here in this world, so we're not separate from the animal world. But we are living in a way that is different from any other creature on this planet. And one of the inherent things with that is this strange paradox. And I like to say that to be an imperfect human being is to be perfectly human,
Nice, like that.
because it is something that's so fundamental to all of us and to the experience of being human that it's really an inescapable reality that we all share.
Yes, we are. We are born with limitations, right? In a
Yeah,
previous episode, I remembered you quoting this Jewish saying
yeah,
that, or this was a mystical, almost Jewish koan, I would
yeah,
say. So, a being that is infinite, immortal, and eternal. What does
yeah.
that being lack? And the answer was
Limitations.
limitations, imperfections. You could also say.
Yeah. And it was interesting last week when we talked about self transcendence, we were talking about the foolishness of trying to chase after perfection.
Hmm.
Because the thing with perfection is we're in a constantly evolving universe. And so wherever you're aiming as being your perfect position to be, by the time you've arrived there, the universe has moved on. So,
Yeah. So you could also say that perfection is in the transcendence itself.
yeah.
So it's in that respect, it's good to aim for perfection, but you have to realize that perfection is not a static status quo situation. It's something that's always going beyond and beyond.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got a couple of points that I think are really useful. So when I mentioned that there's this paradox to being human, and so what a paradox means, because we've all heard the word, but a lot of us don't know exactly what a paradox means. It means two seemingly contradictory states existing at the same time. And so it's two things that seem to contradict each other. And the interesting thing is the most important word there is seemingly contradictory.
But like being a Dutchman and being very generous,
Yes,
for instance.
exactly. This type of thing, and the core of humanity involves a lot of these paradoxes. And so I just noted a couple down. Um, so to be human is to be incomplete, but yet to yearn for completion.
Mm.
It's to be uncertain, and it's to yearn for certainty. It's to be imperfect, but to long for perfection.
But why is that a contradiction? Because if you are uncertain, I would say it's only makes sense that you would long for certainty, something that you're lacking.
Yeah, exactly. So the contradiction lies in the type of being that we are, but the type of states we want to attain to.
Hmm.
So we're a being that lives in an incredibly complex universe, and we are imperfect, but yet we really want perfection.
Hmm.
We really want certainty. We really want completion. And this one I like think is really good, that we're broken in some way. We're broken. We're not cohesive. We're not put together fully, but we yearn for wholeness.
Mm.
And so all human beings have these feelings within them that sometimes you just feel broken in a million pieces, and all you want is to be put together properly.
Right.
And sometimes you feel just so confused about reality, and you just want some certainty. And a lot of these contradictions or these states of being, that where we are and what we think we want, these cause us so many problems. Like the idea that we live in a place of uncertainty. We live in an uncertain universe. We don't know what's happening tomorrow. We don't know what's happening 5 minutes from now. But yet we yearn for the certainty. And so you often see that in people's thinkings, where people's thinking becomes very rigid and very fixed. And they decide, I don't want to have to think about these things anymore. I'm just going to decide on a position. And at that point, it doesn't matter what evidence you present to people. if they've already decided that they're sick of dealing with uncertainty and they would rather take the position of certainty, they'll choose a position and they will no longer be open to the new information that's coming their way. They'll no longer be open to transformation.
So what's the proper way to deal with uncertainty then?
Well, I think the embracing of all of these parts of our being, the understanding that this is our nature. It is to be imperfect. Our nature is to be uncertain. Our nature is in some way to be less than whole. And it's perfectly right to have an aspiration to transform and go beyond that state. But we can't believe that we're going to find it here on earth.
Yeah, so it's, again, starting from acceptance.
Exactly, yeah. It's accepting that that is the nature of this reality, that we're playing the game in. And that takes away somewhat the suffering that these states can cause us, because you know what it feels like to just be unsure and uncertain on what's the right thing to do and which decision to make. And there is a real sense of resolution when you decide, okay, I'm going to do this. So whether you're right or wrong, it almost doesn't matter. It's just making a decision sometimes takes away that sense of uncertainty.
Yeah. So for the moment, there is some certainty. I mean, it will not last.
Yeah.
For the moment, the duration of your decision, you've created a little path of certainty that you're walking.
Yeah, and that gives you some relief. But I think in some way, if we step back and we look at the type of game we focus on talking about, which is the game of spirituality, in some way, the game of spirituality, I think it's learning and practicing to live here and now as truly and fully as possible. But in some way as well, it's learning to accept and be able to live with the uncertainty and with the imperfection of our nature. Because we realize through our acceptance that all of these things are fluid and can be changed. We realize that this is where we are right now, but we know that things will change as we move forward. So nothing is fixed, nothing is forever. Everything is always evolving and transforming. So I think spirituality is the game that teaches us. First of all, it allows us to see our imperfections. And maybe we want to think a little bit more about what imperfections are, because I think that's a really good place to start with, because it's one of those things that humanity, since the beginning of time. So let's go back to the famous biblical story from the book of Genesis, which is the story of Adam and Eve, which we've talked about earlier. So there's an idea that there was these, the original human beings was Adam and Eve, and they fell from the state of paradise or perfection. And I like the idea that paradise, the meaning of the word, is a walled garden.
Oh, yes.
So they were somewhere protected from the uncertainty of the world, from the troubles of the world, the imperfections, the brokenness of the world. So they existed in the space. And because they ate from this particular tree, which was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the tree of the knowledge, we could say, of perfection and imperfection. Because before that, there was no knowledge. I don't think before they ate from this tree, they did not understand, they did not even experience this idea of imperfection. And it's when we step into the space of being self-aware, which we talked about in a previous episode, that at some point in our history as Homo sapiens, we had this tremendous transformation where we became self-aware. And we can call it the cognitive revolution. And it's when our brain expanded in a way that it's really unclear exactly how that happened. It's such a miracle.
But do you say that before that, imperfection did not really exist?
Well, that's a really good question. So if we look at a tribe of lions in the Serengeti National Park, and they're walking around, is there any imperfections in their actions?
Yeah, I would say no. Animals are perfect because they live out their true nature. They don't know anything else.
Yeah.
And they are not self-aware. They cannot reflect on their behavior.
Yeah.
So they cannot act in any other way.
Yeah.
So in that sense, they're perfect. They're made, let's say, if they're divine creations, they're made like their creator has made them, and they're acting out that particular nature that they have. So
yeah, exactly. And I think that's a beautiful thing to think about, that all other life here is perfect. it's acting out its true nature in the way it should act. Like you even look at a weed. A weed is not doing anything destructive or harmful. It's just simply acting out its nature. Like we don't like sometimes we may be frustrated, but I don't blame the weed for where it decides to grow. I just think, well, that's the nature of this type of life form, and this is how it's going to behave. And thinking or hoping it would act in any other way, I would know is a foolish position to take.
Yeah, it would not certainly start sprouting flowers and offering fruits to the world. It's, that's not a realistic expectation.
No, and so the story was when Adam and Eve were in paradise, that Adam would walk with God. So he was in tune, he was in harmony with God. So there was no, and it's like we could say the same thing with all of the other animals and the other life on earth. It walks with God. It is the way it moves through time and space is completely in tune with its original nature. It has not lost its way. It knows what it's doing, and it acts that behaviors out. And so when we talk about this cognitive revolution, we suddenly develop this ability to think in abstract ways, and we were aware that we were conscious. So we weren't only conscious in the universe, but suddenly we became aware that we were conscious. And that leads to all of these interesting experiences we have as human beings now, like the idea of becoming self-conscious. Because when God came to visit Adam that evening after eating from this tree, the first thing that Adam did was immediately hid in the bushes.
Yes.
And God said, Adam, where are you? And he said, God, I cannot come out because of my nakedness.
Yeah.
And so there was no nakedness for any other animal that is acting in tune with nature or in harmony with nature.
Yeah, so shame is not existing in the animal world. Like only humans experience shame or embarrassment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that story, as I talked about in that episode, I think that story of Adam and Eve is this ancient tale that people have passed on, which captures what it was like at this time to go from a time where we were in harmony with nature to suddenly we woke up in some way. We gained this knowledge of good and evil, which brought about the knowledge of our own imperfections.
Mm-hmm.
And some people will make the argument that was also the beginning of obviously, of evil. Because when you start to understand who you are and what hurts you and what affects you, you suddenly also know what will harm someone else.
Yeah. Well, isn't the story of Cain and Abel immediately following the fall from paradise, which is the original story of good versus evil, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's interesting that followed right after the fall from paradise.
Yeah, so that's the beginning of our knowledge of our imperfection. And I think what we could say imperfection is, like the very root cause of imperfection is ignorance. So
explain what ignorance is.
So ignorance is when we do not see the world as it is, when we see the world through a deluded or a mistaken lens. So it's covering up the true reality of life is hidden from us. And we are seeing, as I've said before, that we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are.
Yeah.
So all of our delusions, all of our fantasies, all of our fears and worries cloud and cover the true nature of reality. And this is really ignorance. When you don't see what is right in front of you, you create a picture and a story, and that gets overlaid on top of what is right in front of you. And I think that when people do have this experience of truly waking up and seeing reality as it is, there's been so many people throughout times who've recorded states of what they would call cosmic consciousness. And what I would say that this cosmic consciousness is seeing reality as it truly is. So there's a famous story of a gentleman, like sometime in like the 1500s, 1600s in England, and just spontaneously one day he was walking down the street, and he tells the story of suddenly in one moment of awakening to the true nature of reality around him. And the absolute majesty, the absolute beauty, the absolute interconnectedness of all life and all consciousness and all beings, and also the deeply profound sense of love and completeness and wholeness.
Yeah.
So it's the exact opposite of how we normally experience reality, as broken, uncertain, imperfect beings. And so people throughout time have woken up to this experience.
Well, there's a very famous, one of his famous stories is from Ramana Maharshi, who apparently at his 16th year fell into enlightenment, as he described it. So from one moment to the next, he was suddenly enlightened and saw the world in a totally different place.
Yeah.
And there's a story of Eckhart Tolle, the German mystic or the German spiritual teacher, who was very depressed and a lot of anxiety. And then he said, I can't really live with myself. And then he said, well, if I cannot really live with myself, who's the person saying that?
Yeah.
So he realized and kind of stepped outside of his limited self, his ego, and
Yeah.
fell into, well, you could say a spiritual awakening, where
Yeah.
he just experienced profound joy that
Yeah.
lasted many days, weeks.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing to know, that there is just beyond our realm, just beyond the bounds of our consciousness, is a radically different experience of reality.
Mm-hmm.
So we sometimes feel so limited and stuck in our brokenness and our incompleteness. But just to know that just beyond that, just beyond the edges of who we are, there is a completely different experience of reality.
Mm-hmm.
And that many people have experienced that. It's not one or two. It's not something that is only comes to the most blessed or the most special people on earth. That many people have found a way to enter into that state. And I think the great masters throughout time are people who played the game and played the game of discovering and learning to live from that state of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So they made that space beyond the limited bounds of their own reality. They made that expanded self their home. So
yeah, wonderful. Yeah. Okay, so you wanted to lay out some different
yeah,
states of the imperfections, or what did you want to plan out?
yeah. So what we want to think, I think, with imperfections is that imperfections is an imperfect way of seeing the world. And so very often, and I probably made that mistake as well as a younger man, when you hear about things like the 7 deadly sins, you have this idea that there's someone who's judging people and their actions, and that if you make these particular types of behaviors or act them out, that somehow that goes very much against the nature of reality, and it's somehow beyond the pale. It's a terrible thing to do. And the interesting thing is, that's not how ancient people thought about the sins that they talked about in the world. And actually, I did some looking into that, and the first person that I found that actually really laid out, and what he called them was the 8 cardinal sins.
Okay.
And this is one of the Desert Fathers. His name was Evagrius.
What is it? Explain the Desert Fathers.
So the Desert Fathers were some of the earliest Christian mystics. So it was in like the 2nd and 3rd century. They went off into the desert in Palestine and Gaza and Egypt, and they set up hermitages. So they were really the ones who founded the monastic tradition through Christianity. And so what they were seeking to do is take them outside of civilization and society and find a place where they could really try and experiment with the bounds of their consciousness, but also to understand their own limitations. And so Evagrius did an amazing job. Like, this was in the mid 300s.
Long time ago.
Yeah, so a very long time ago, and he came up with this list of what he called the 8 cardinal sins. And so what you want to think, though, is these are not these actions or these qualities are not being judged.
No, I think it's good to differentiate. Our teachers for Chinmoy often talked about sin being just another word for imperfection.
Yes.
So in the Christian, let's say, worldview, sin is it's laden with like heaviness, guilt, and shame and punishment. But in the Indian tradition, they call it imperfections. It's like nothing to be ashamed of. It's something that is part of our nature.
Yeah.
It's just something that needs to grow into more perfection.
Yeah.
It needs to get more. It's like a little bit of unilluminedness in us that needs to gain some light.
Yeah, and it's the areas in which we are not seeing the world properly. We're not experiencing the world properly because what you want to think about is each of these ideas. If you start acting it out in your life, it's wrong. They're not good ideas. They're wrong ideas in some way. And so wrong ideas leads to wrong thinking.
Yeah.
So if you have some ideas in your mind and in your picture of the world, so you've got an idea that you should be focusing on this particular thing, but that's wrong.
Yeah.
then you're going to start thinking in a way. So this idea is wrong. That leads you to you thinking in a way that's wrong. And that leads you then to acting in a way that's wrong.
Right.
So there's this very clear...
And here wrong means it lowers our consciousness. It makes
Yeah.
us miserable, unhappy. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, it's just out of sync. It's out of alignment with the true nature of reality.
Yeah.
So Evagrius is...
Good man.
Yeah. So he saw that when we are acting from these places of cardinal sin, that we were seeing things from the perspective of our fears and our fantasies. So it's based, these ideas are all based on unreality.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first one he identified was gluttony. And so gluttony, we kind of think of it as someone who is greedy or overindulging.
In the food world, right?
Yeah, in the physical world.
In the
physical world. But he actually said the true meaning of gluttony is anxiety about our health or of becoming ill.
Oh.
So it's a fixation and worry about our own health and our own well-being.
It's like being a hypochondriac.
Yeah, and this would often play out around how we feed ourselves, because obviously that's one thing that we have control over. So when you see someone, even if someone was starving themselves, if they were doing it to try and become more healthy, that would actually fall under the category of gluttony.
Really?
Which is really amusing, because we think of it as this overindulgence, but it's overindulgence in the idea of our own health and well-being.
But didn't these desert fathers used to fast for long periods of time?
So yes, exactly. So Evagrius himself fasted for a very long time, and then he realized that it was actually destroying his health. And so he got rid of the whole thing.
He gave it up. So, just like the Buddha. The Buddha, starved himself when he was in the ascetic journey of his life towards enlightenment, and he also realized the middle path.
Yeah,
right? He gave up his starvation.
Yes, so, exactly.
Good realization. He ceased to be a glutton, although he was like totally skeleton.
And the interesting thing is, I do see like this quality. It takes over people in a very insidious way, because it's coming from a point of view of care and concern. It's like thinking, I really need to look after myself. I really need to protect myself from illnesses, or protect myself from disease and illness. And often what they saw, the Desert Fathers, was anything that was causing us to focus on an unreal reality. So some fantasy about the future, some way we think things would be, was always the wrong thing to do, because the true path of spirituality is living in the here and now. And so all of these things, all of these qualities take us out of the here and now.
Interesting.
They take us to somewhere else. We're no longer here focused. When I'm thinking only about worrying about illness or about my own health, I'm thinking about the future. I'm thinking about, I can't eat this food, or I can't eat that food, because I'm thinking that some point in the future, I'm trying to save myself or protect myself.
But sometimes thinking of the future is good. Like, you need to plan your life sometimes. You need to, you need to make money, you need to have a job, so you need to plan. Is that always bad then? So is a cardinal sin?
So we'll get onto that one, because that one's coming up. So the first one is gluttony. So anxiety about health or becoming ill. The next one is fornication. And so most people now think that of the act of indulging in the human relations, but for them, that was not the thing at all. It was like, for them, it was all in the imaginative world. It was thinking constantly about these types of relations, and thinking about body parts, and thinking about other people. And so it was constantly pulling you away from the here and now, and fantasizing and imagining things that were not real.
Right.
And so that was the same type of problem, that we were no longer here and now. We were imagining, we were caught in our own fantasies and delusions.
Sounds like a little bit of hedonism there.
Yeah. So the next one it talks a little bit to what you were mentioning. So the third one is avarice. And avarice actually means the love of money. But it wasn't money per se that was the problem that they were concerned about. What they saw was the fixation with planning for an unreal future. So it was your obsession with preparing for your retirement, or preparing for, having all your finances in order so you can do this, that, or the other thing. And as we've talked about many times before, what that tends to do is it takes us away from the present moment, and it puts our goal as a fixed point somewhere in the future. We have some goal of success that we're aiming at. So we want to have this amount of money by this point in our life. And as
That,
we know.
that makes us unhappy, according to the Desert Father.
It does, because it keeps stealing you away from the now. And what they saw was all of the meaning that you're looking for in your life can only exist in the here and now. We're trying to capture the true nature of reality. We're trying to see reality as it truly is. And every time we do something that takes us away from the here and now, that puts our minds and our imagination in some fantasy, in some unreal future that perhaps will never be.
Yeah, I heard somebody say the best thing to do is that which comes into your mind, the inspiration that comes to you in this present moment. Like, do this.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, if you need to apply for a job, like you need a job in life.
Yeah.
So you need to, at some point, get an interview or send
Yeah.
your resume. But then the thought in the here and now says, send in your resume. That still keeps you in the here and now and does the things that are necessary for your future. So you're not all the time thinking of the future or in the future,
Yeah.
but you're acting from the here and now with the inspirations that come to you in the here and now.
Yeah.
And that way you plan, I would say, you could plan your life in perfectly.
Yeah.
Without going off the rails.
Yeah. And so this goes back to that idea of what type of universe we live in. Like, do we live in a friendly universe or a hostile universe? So if you live in a hostile universe, you constantly need to prepare because the universe is attempting to kill you.
Right.
But obviously we know that's a very tough way to live.
Yeah.
And so if you've already decided that you live in a friendly universe, then if you have faith that the universe will provide for you, that God, the divine, will inspire you at the right moments to do the right things. It'll put you in the right place to have the opportunities that you need. And so that's the idea with avarice, that you're attempting to do God's job for him.
Mm-hmm.
You're planning for your future.
Yeah.
You're preparing everything for you, for yourself, rather than relying on something bigger and faster and more transcendent.
So the Greeks had this concept of hubris, which means confidence, right? To kind of rival with the gods. So to think of yourself as a god, but on some other level we are.
Yeah,
it's really a fine line sometimes.
So
where do you draw the
paradoxes?
Yeah, it is.
So we've got the first three: gluttony, fornication, avarice, envy. And so envy is wishing and fantasies of things being other than they are.
Ooh, okay.
So this is a thing, when someone else, we see their situation and we see their situation is different from our situation, we can often be envious of them. We can often say, oh, look at that person. Like, how good is that? Like, their life is so easy. And from our perspective, with the problems we are dealing with, we think that their life is perfect because they're not dealing with the particular problem that we're dealing with. But the thing is that we forget that they've got their own unique sets of problems. They've got their own unique sets of imperfections that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And really the game is with all of these is they hide the true nature of reality from us.
Yeah, we're only looking at the Instagram posts, like the outside of the reality, which looks perfect. And
we're not seeing what it feels like, what it looks like from their perspective. Because the thing is, whoever you talk to, it's incredibly rare to find someone who feels as though their life is truly perfect. Like, people will put on a facade, people will, pretend that their life is better than it is. But if you actually really get to know people and connect with them, you'll see that everyone is dealing with things because it's fundamental. We're imperfect beings.
Right.
And so that is envy. So envy is the wishing and the fantasies of things being other than they are. And really the cure in some way to that is acceptance. It's accepting that your situation is the right situation for you to make the most possible progress from.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to some friends a couple of days ago, and there's an idea that if we think about all of the problems of the world, and we think about everyone's problems, and if we created a giant swimming pool and we put everyone's problems in the swimming pool, and then we asked you to choose which problems you'd like to take, you could choose any of them. Like, there's an infinite number.
But you have to choose problems. Like,
you have to choose a set of problems that someone has put into the swimming pool.
Yeah.
You would nearly always, I believe, choose your own problems, because you are the only one in this universe who's uniquely qualified to deal with these.
Yeah.
You've been given this special set of interesting conundrums that you alone can solve.
Right.
And so when you look at other people's problems, because the thing is, your problems are connected to your imperfections, and your imperfections are deluding you. They're making you blind to the true nature of reality. But someone who doesn't suffer from your problems, he looks at your situation And just as you look at someone else's situation, you're like, oh my God, it's so easy. Like, I can't believe that this person cannot see. It's so obvious
Yeah.
what they need to do. But because they have a certain set of imperfections, they're not seeing the situation as you are.
Yeah, right.
And when you look at that, you've got to start to think, oh God, like in which ways am I not seeing reality properly? In which ways am I deluded about the true nature of reality? Because if you can see it in someone else's life,
Yeah.
and you can see that everyone around you, you can see the problems or issues or imperfections they have, that you can see very easily what they need to change or what they need to do.
Yeah, somehow it's very difficult to see your own imperfections, right? It's like you have the
Exactly.
blind spot. It's
Exactly.
always easier to see others' imperfections. So why
Yeah.
is that, you think?
So, I mean, I think that's part of the game because it's an experiential game.
Hmm.
It's not a game that is played in a completely objective sense. It's a very subjective game, and so we're embodied creatures. And so we've got what we think, we've got what we experience, we've got what we feel, and then we've got what we make of it. So it's got all of these layers of cognition that we're doing to experience the world. It's
Yeah.
not just we see things and then we react. That's not how we
There's
experience
lots of filters that the information passes through.
there's so many layers to what we are. And in some ways, the game of spirituality is the peeling off of the layers.
Yeah.
You start to remove the layers that are no longer serving you and that are blinding you to the truth of reality.
Right.
So envy. So anger
That's number
is number 5.
Wow.
Anger is number 5. And so anger is not the emotion itself that was the problem they saw. They saw it was the attachment that we had to the feeling and the fervor that we had when we were angry. So we have the emotion of anger. But then the problem is when we carry the remnants of that around with us. So we continue to make someone wrong. So someone did something that made us angry. And instead of putting that anger down and moving on with our life, we carry it around with us. We hold on to it. We obsess about that person and wish for some punishment or some retribution towards them.
Yeah.
And that fervor, that feeling that we carry with the anger, that blinds us to reality.
Right.
So you can see that yourself, someone who perhaps you were close to at some point in your life, or you had a lot of concern and care for, and then they've done something that's made you really, really angry with them. And if you don't truly let that anger go and truly forgive them, you can no longer see the goodness in them. So even if for many years you knew this person and you loved this person, you see this with family members. You can have spent so many years together, and then at some point there's some schism happens in their life.
Yeah.
And they talk about the person as though they're the most horrible person
Right.
that's ever existed.
Yeah.
And it's like, I remember a few years ago, you two were best friends. It's you two have not radically changed, but it's like you've become blind because of the anger you're carrying.
Yeah.
So that's the worry of.
Yeah, that's a very tricky one, because if you see only the imperfections in the other person, like you're not seeing the whole reality, obviously.
Yeah,
like nobody is all.
You're deluded, and that's the thing. Like if you look at anyone and you think they're the worst person in the world, you've got to think to yourself, really? They're really the worst person in the world. Like if you can only see like evil and horror and terror in this person, it's like, how realistic is that? Because perhaps they're looking at you in the same way. And you're going to think, well, I'm not really like that. So probably they're also not really like that.
Yeah.
So it's being willing to be humble enough to let go of those stories and to truly move into a space of forgiveness. So this is an interesting one. Number 6, he called acedia.
How do you spell that?
Acedia, acedia. And so what it basically meant, because often people talk about laziness, sloth. He didn't think they were the right way to capture the experience. He thought it was more a state of self-pity. And it's a state where someone is in a state where they feel like, what's the use? Like, what's the point? Like, it's all hopeless. It's all broken. Like, there's no good to be found in this world. And so it's a state of almost wallowing in your own self-pity.
Yeah.
And so you no longer see the world as it is. You see the world through this lens of meaninglessness.
It's like the disease of nihilism, right?
Yeah.
There are many young people nowadays seem to suffer from. They don't find any meaning or purpose in life. And I think it was Nietzsche who said, who talked about the death of God.
Yes.
And many people have, I think, misunderstood that. He was not saying that there is no God. But he said the moment that God disappears from the society will crumble. It's
Yeah.
like that was his prediction. So he
Yeah.
said, we're seeing the death of God, and this will, be in some way the downfall of society. Because if there's
Yeah.
no God as the superstructure, God, you could say, is meaning, is purpose,
Yeah.
and that falls away, then purpose falls away. Like, why do we live in this inhospitable
Yeah.
material world of three
Yeah.
dimensions where there's no real meaning to be found? And that
Yeah.
leads to nihilism and acedia.
Yes, acedia. And the
Is that
interest,
connected to the word acidic?
I don't know. Very good question.
Well,
But the interesting thing with Nietzsche is the second part of that comment was, um, God is dead. But then he also said, but there will never be enough water to wash away the blood.
oh, that's what he said. Wow.
Yeah, it followed on. And
Yeah.
so people who are true materialists or claim to be materialists, they were celebrating that this great thinker has said,
Yeah.
oh, God is dead.
Yeah.
But they forget the warning that
Yes.
we will never have enough water to
And
wash
he said
away
that
the
like
blood.
at the dawn of the 20th century, maybe, when
Yeah.
we had the First World War, Second World War,
Yeah.
the atrocities of the communist era in China and Russia. And
Yeah.
he was pretty spot on with this prediction, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, now it's interesting to see that we live in a time where spirituality is making a real comeback, right?
Yeah.
So meditation and spiritual topics, spiritual awakening is really mainstream. Like, I remember when I started giving meditation classes maybe 25 years ago, that it was such a fringe topic still. Like, you would be a bit suspected if you meditated and you were building castles in the air. What are you doing sitting down there? And it definitely was not as mainstream as it is now. So I think that's a really good development and turn towards more meaning and maybe a rediscovery of the concept of God.
Yeah.
Like, God is no longer the strict, you know, um, uh, punisher
Yeah.
who is looking down on us and judging us at every moment and threatening us with hell if we don't obey. But it's really a redefinition of the concept of God as a God of love and
Yeah.
acceptance and compassion and wisdom and forgiveness and all these divine qualities that God really is.
Yeah. And I think what has really changed for people as well is their belief in the potentiality of you having a personal relationship with the divine. And that's a big change because for many centuries, religions were the gatekeepers of God.
Mhm.
And so this was a really cutting comment that I heard at some point, and it was, religion is for those who are afraid or do not want to go to hell, and spirituality is for those who've already been there.
Yeah.
So for those who've really hit rock bottom or experienced some real trauma and suffering in their life, they have this real cry to find the divine and
Yeah.
find their way back to God. Whereas those who go along, yeah, I think Carl Jung said in some ways, religion can inoculate you against experiences of the divine. So you get a little bit of a taste or a little bit of a hint or the fragrance of the divine, but that actually ends up stopping you having your own profound
Yeah.
experiences of the divine.
Right. I must comment on that. That I think the spiritual yearning does not only come from suffering.
Yeah.
Like, if I look at my case, I did not come. I did not come from a very troubled or
Yeah.
dark childhood. I had a very happy childhood. Yet
Yeah.
I also was fervently and intensely yearning
Yeah.
for spiritual truth.
Yeah.
So it can come to anyone, really.
Yeah. Hence your disturbing lack of imperfections. But I think it is true though that you see many people who, like, within our own spiritual community, you hear many people tell their stories of what brought them to the spiritual life, and it does resonate. It's a theme and a thread throughout so many people's lives that they reached a point where they were no longer feeling any meaning or purpose in what they were
Yeah.
doing. There was an emptiness and a hollowness.
Well, yes, that's true.
To
Yeah, if you
experience.
define hell in that way, then I
Yeah.
guess everybody has experienced that.
Yeah, it's like you're going through the motions, but it's like, why am I doing this? Like,
Yeah.
what is the purpose? And so I think that does awaken in people, or perhaps it comes at the same time where people are awakening to the need for a deeper reality.
It's so interesting that this hunger for purpose is so deep in us.
Yeah.
That why do you think that is?
Well, I think like it's really the religious, like the spiritual or religious impulse is so deeply ingrained in people because you find in almost every group of people at every time throughout all of human history, people were attempting to make sense of the world. So the first stories that we would tell would be the stories of creation, the creation myths. And so as soon as people started to become self-aware and conscious in this way, they started to look around and they started to try and make sense of things. And they started to see consciousness and life and everything around them. They saw everything was inhabited by spirit. So the stars, the plants, the land itself, the wind, the sky, all of these things were not separate from them. They were in some way connected because they also were alive. They were also filled with spirit. And so it is something that seems fundamental to the game of life. And that's what I always like to see, is that if what we're doing and talking about is true, we should see signs of it. If there is a thread of true divinity and meaning and purpose in this universe, it should be constantly bubbling up to the surface. It should be something that people forget about for countless centuries, and every now and then someone comes up with the idea anew.
Yeah.
And that never seems to be the case. It seems like throughout time, constantly people are telling stories to make sense of, to create a meaning and create a deeper connection to the world around them. So, and then the danger as you see it, I joke about my dear friends, the Germans. So I'm very lucky to spend time with our friend Shamalia in Berlin and teach meditation there at our meditation center and just experience the wonder of Berlin culture. But I do joke that because Germany has become a very secular country over time, and I see now like the number of Christians there has really dropped to its lowest level perhaps ever. But one thing they take very seriously and in a deeply religious way is their saunaing. And so the sauna.
Oh,
the practice of the sauna.
okay.
So you know, the sauna, the hot room where you spend time in. And so although they've given up going to church or practicing a formal religion, they bring this religiosity to the practice of the sauna. So there's these very strict rules about how the saunaing should be done. So the temperature of the sauna, what you must wear in the sauna, the rituals you must do when you come in. You must never talk to anyone. It must be experienced in pure, pristine silence. And I find this wonderful religiosity around it. And it's funny because I talk to some of my German friends who in many ways are very non-typical Germans, and they're very open and they're very progressive in all sorts of ways. But as soon as I touch on saunaing, there's a very, very serious and very strict way with which it must be approached.
That's funny. It reminds me a little bit of the religiosity around cycling.
Oh,
like,
yes.
you know, the professional
Yeah.
cyclists, like, you know, you can only wear white socks. They have to
And
be a
the
certain length.
Yep.
You can only wear your white shoes when you've biked 100 miles straight.
Yeah.
You've earned your white shoes, and then there's all these rules about the side, the cut of the shirt.
Yeah. So you see people bring that feeling, and especially if a culture has lost a clear way to express that urge, I think you'll find it bubbling up in different forms, in different avenues of life. But perhaps it becomes unhealthy because it's no longer pointing at the highest good. Because that's the thing. Like, if now saunaing becomes your religion, it's like, where are you going with that?
Yeah.
Like, what are you hoping? Where is the final destination
Enlightenment.
of the enlightenment of saunaing? Is it one day when you finally reach, you know, at the right temperature and the right period of time, it's like you're going to burst through into a completely different space of consciousness, and perhaps you will. You know, perhaps this could be a new way.
So I just want to pause it for a minute, and we're back. And you were talking about, what were we talking about?
Well, we're talking about the religiosity of saunaing.
Yes. So I think we covered that.
That was a segue.
And which imperfection are we at now?
So we are now up to 7. 7 is vainglory, which is a very interesting word. And so what vainglory is: daydreaming about one's own magnificence and imagined glory. Daydreaming about one's own magnificence and my imagined glory.
It seems like how do you say this? Yeah, the hubris that we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it hides the true nature of reality from us.
Yeah.
And so this is the sinfulness of it. So because we talked about in an early episode, I thought we just touched back on that the real meaning of sin is to miss the target.
Yes.
So to aim incorrectly.
The Greek word is hamartia.
Yeah.
Missing the target.
So missing the target. So what we're talking about is not wrong because there's something inherently bad about these behaviors or these.
They're all very human, and they're
Yeah, it's just, but
Imperfections.
it will lead to us missing the target. And what the target is reality.
Ooh, with a capital R, I would say.
Yeah, like experiencing reality as it truly is.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're aiming for. So when we're daydreaming about our own magnificence, and what this stops us doing is actually working towards our own magnificence.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing wrong with believing that there is some greatness in you. But if you spend all your time daydreaming about it rather than taking practical steps to achieve it, if you think that you are entitled to
So
anything,
give an example of somebody who would do that. Like, do we see that in society played out?
yeah, we see a certain type of person who, instead of going about and achieving their own greatness, will actually spend their time instead trying to cut other people down. They'll look around and they'll have their own imagined greatness. So they're seeing themselves as better than they actually are in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to a place where you become a true hypocrite. Because you'll look around and you'll judge everyone else and you'll say, oh, look at these people, these people are useless. Like, why am I spending my time with them?
Hmm.
And it's not true greatness, because true greatness, I think, comes hand in hand with humility.
Right.
Because when we truly achieve something, we want to offer it to other people. We want to lift other people up. So if you find yourself imagining your own magnificence and greatness, and from that you feel as though you should judge the people around you, perhaps that you're suffering from a delusion.
So there's a song right now that we sing by Sri Chinmoy that says, I think it's a quote by someone. I forget who it's by, but it's all great men are not good men.
That's the thing. Yeah, greatness and goodness are two different worlds. And it's wonderful when they join together.
Yeah.
But it's like a small subset. It's like a Venn diagram. So if we have a circle saying greatness, a circle saying goodness, they cross over, and there's a very small subset of people who exist in both spaces.
Exactly. Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, and Gorbachev's.
But yeah, when you find that your greatness or your imagined greatness is leading to you judging the world harshly, then perhaps it's time to step back and reassess.
You're practicing too much. What was the word?
Daydreaming?
Vainglory.
Yeah, vainglory. Exactly. So watch out for this thing. And then the final one is pride.
Oh yes. Well, that's on everybody's imperfection list.
Yeah, and so pride, how they describe it, is believing that we can do anything without the help or the need of the divine. So it's like believing that we ourselves are gods and we can control everything. Because this is another thing, that we live in a world that is uncertain, but we want to be in control. Yeah. That's a huge thing, and people really struggle with that one. People are desperate to have some sense of control of reality, but because of the nature of reality and its uncertainty, people really suffer.
But isn't that the thing that governments always struggle with? Like the tyrannical governments are veering towards more and more control. We see that even in our Western world, with all the control is being levied through all the technology that's now around us.
And so that really, it comes from a place of pride. Because you're overvaluing your abilities, you're overvaluing your expertise, your knowledge. And that's one of the great things about humility. When we talked about that, is humility is being truly aware of your abilities and also your limitations.
Yeah, and we're talking about the organization of the AA recently, because you met with somebody who had who was associated with that, right?
Yeah,
and they have a very interesting principle, right? They say one of their principles is you have to stand up and you have to say, I have a problem, but I cannot fix my problem. And only a higher power can fix that problem. And I think the AA is one of the most successful organizations dealing with alcoholism in the world.
Yeah, and it's a program, for those who are not familiar with it. It's called the 12-step program, and we're not going to talk about it in depth, but just knowing that for the longest time, people with drinking problems were seen as incurable, because people who become alcoholic, it's such a deep addiction that throughout history, let's say millions of people have suffered from alcoholism, and people have tried in so many different ways to cure them and never found an access to this. And it was only in the 1930s when they came up with this 12-step program. And really the foundation of the program is spirituality. So that they saw that the only way, because in some way an addict is someone who has a deep pit of despair inside of them. And the addiction is attempting to fill that pit of despair. So the only thing that can truly bring you back towards wholeness and take someone who's broken and make them complete again is the practice of spirituality. It's something transcendent, something beyond yourself. So their process, the first few steps is very simple. It's admitting that you have a problem. Because you see many people who have a problem, and it's obvious that they have a problem, but until they themselves see it, they can never transform it.
Yeah, it's the acceptance step, basically.
Yeah. So you can see someone who's suffering badly from their own pride or their own jealousy or envy or whatever quality it is. But until they themselves can see it, they can't transform it.
Mhm.
So the admitting that you have a problem is the seeing of it. It's the speaking it out. And it's not just admitting it to yourself in some way. It's really powerful if you can admit it to the world, to say, hey, I have a problem. And there's something wonderful about that because it makes you somehow more real and it makes you somehow more authentic and it makes you more human. So if I come to you and I say, hey, I have a problem, it doesn't make you judge me. If you're a real human being, you won't just say, oh, look, this person's so terrible. Look at them. They're suffering from this problem. And actually, when you open to someone that you have a problem that you're struggling with, it actually brings forward the heart of the listener. And so there's a deeper, more profound connection with the people around you when you admit to them that you're suffering from a problem. And then the second step is to admit that you have tried but been unsuccessful in dealing with the problem. And for this, I've got a really beautiful aphorism by Sri Chinmoy, which talks a little bit about this experience. And it says, when you're in the heart, you're all ready to give all your imperfections to God. When you're in the mind, you either see no imperfections in your life, or you feel that you can somehow manage your life with all your imperfections.
Interesting. Two very different viewpoints.
And so I think that's what happens at some point if you find yourself caught up with an imperfection, and especially as your imperfections, if they're strong enough, you're going to have a wrong map of the world.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be seeing the world as it is. So you're constantly going to be running into problems. You're going to be running into problems in your relationships. You're going to be running into problems with your friends, with your job, all of these things. And you see people who have an imperfection that is really clouding their view. It's creating wrong thinking and wrong actions in the world. You see their life becomes a total disaster.
Yeah.
And what that does then, that brings you down in some way. It humbles you. And at that point, I think you come out of your mind at some point and you connect with your heart.
Yeah.
And your heart is all ready to give up all your imperfections.
Yeah. What does that mean? To give up your imperfections, to offer them to God?
Yeah. So offer them to realize that you're broken and incomplete. And like offer them to something transcendent, because the third step in the program, the 12-step program, is to ask for help from something transcendent, something beyond yourself.
Yeah.
And so they realize that that's what you need to do. You need to ask the universe. You need to ask the divine. You need to ask the highest self to come and act in and through, because you cannot solve the problems that you have in your life from the same state of consciousness that created those problems.
Yes, that's a famous Einstein quote. We have quoted him before, but did he say like a problem can never be solved with the mindset that the problem is created from?
Exactly.
You need to think outside of the box.
Yeah, and it's like the idea. It's you can't pull yourself up from your own bootstraps.
Yes.
So if you stood there and you held on, let's say you held on to your shoelaces, and you thought, okay, I'm going to pull as hard as I can, and I'm going to lift myself up off the ground. You obviously know that that's an impossible task.
Yeah.
Because you're inside yourself and you can't lift yourself from within yourself.
Yeah.
So you need to go beyond yourself to transform these.
So somebody could say, well, I can have another human help me with that.
Yeah. So it has to be something outside of yourself, something transcendent, something beyond yourself.
It's going to be another person.
And so you could say, because you can posit, you can say that the divine, the highest consciousness can operate through someone else. So someone else can come and help lift you up.
Right.
But it has to be something transcendent, something beyond yourself. And so this is really interesting, Sri Chinmoy's aphorism, because he's saying when we're in the heart, we're open and willing to give up all of these wrong thoughts, wrong ways of thinking. When we're in the mind has its own pride and ego. So the mind is the home of the ego. And the ego often, very, very often, does not want to be wrong. It wants to see itself as perfect, and it wants to blame all of the problems of the world and in your life on everyone else around you. But the heart is so willing to accept the responsibility. It's willing to accept that it is that our being, we are imperfect. And if we want to go beyond who we are now, we need to be willing to let go of those parts of ourselves because they're not serving us, our imperfections. But so Sri Chinmoy said, when we're in the mind, we either see no imperfections. And so that's the state I think a lot of people exist in, where their mind is hiding all of their imperfections from themselves.
Yeah.
So they're not actually aware, even in their day-to-day activities, when they look back on the week, they don't actually even see the imperfections, the way that they're misrepresenting the world.
And is that connected to one of the cardinal sins, you would say?
So I mean, it's everyone has got a special and unique collection of those cardinal sins, those imperfections. So someone might have some gluttony and a little bit of envy and a little bit of vainglory. Everyone's got a unique combination of them.
And he said that these were the 7 or the 7? Or
he said there was 8.
8.
Yeah.
And we covered all of them now?
Yep.
Yeah, so these are all the imperfections there are. He identified, there's no more than those.
So, I mean, you can always find, the thing is the universe is constantly transcending itself.
Yes.
So imperfection is constantly transcending itself. So that's the beautiful thing about it. It's both divinity and imperfection are both playing a game of transcendence.
Yeah, exactly. Well, imperfections are also make the game interesting. Like if we would all be perfect, like there would not be much game involved. I mean, the game here is to transcend our imperfections. And to do that, again, coming back to a spiritual practice, daily practice.
Yeah.
That is the tool that you have to reshape your consciousness, to enlighten your consciousness, to heighten your consciousness and deepen it. And I think when the more we expand ourselves, the imperfections themselves, we outgrow them in a sense.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of getting more light into our system.
Yeah.
It's the old story of light and darkness, right? Imperfection is a form of darkness, but darkness is just the absence of light.
Yeah.
Or it's light in an infinitesimal form.
Yeah.
It's like light that is not yet illumined, as our teacher would say. And so, the imperfections can be transcended. And I would say that the first step is the daily spiritual practice.
Yeah, and what we want to think, the Desert Fathers had this great saying that they always reverted back to, and it was pay attention to yourself. And so, and it's really nice because it's attending to yourself. That's what you're doing. When you're paying attention, you're really attending to yourself.
Reflecting.
And so the only way to see who you truly are is really by paying attention to yourself. And that's when you start to have these glimpses and moments where you start to realize that you're not seeing things as they truly are. You start to realize that you're missing the mark. And your daily practice is attempting to sit with your deepest and truest self, like diving deep within, or flying up to your highest state of consciousness, or diving within to your deepest state of consciousness. It's the same experience. But when you're sitting in that place, you're sitting in a place of presence, of connection with that deepest part of yourself, but you're also attending to yourself. You're paying attention, you're watching. And so when things come up for you, you don't just let thoughts come into your mind and carry you off with them. You really should be paying attention. And so that's the thing. Meditation is a very dynamic and very powerful practice. It's not just a very passive process of sitting there and just turning off. It's vigilant. You have to be paying attention. You have to be aware. And you'll have ideas, you'll have thoughts, you'll have things rise up. And this is always an opportunity to let them go.
Yeah.
When the thoughts come, like pay attention, see what they are, and then let them go.
Yeah.
And
eventually you will end up into silence.
Yeah.
So that's the essence, I would say, of meditation, is the silence.
Yeah.
Finding that silence. But it lives beyond the mind, obviously.
Yeah.
The silence is not where the thoughts are being created. So
no.
Yeah, we first have to get rid of those thoughts. Yeah. And there's other techniques like concentration that can help with that. And Sri Chinmoy did say meditation is communication with silence, which I love.
Yeah. Because I think the true nature of the highest consciousness is beyond words. And one time it was I had a really beautiful moment where Sri Chinmoy often had visitors to come and visit him at his meditation center here in New York, and we call it Aspiration Ground. And he had a young lady was visiting, I think, with her mother or a friend, and Sri Chinmoy stopped and was having an interaction with her and talking to her. And very often when we try and teach something, we teach it through words. So we're trying to explain concepts. We're trying to put concepts into words that make the concept understandable, or make a feeling or a state of being understandable in some way for someone. But Sri Chinmoy said actually the truest teachings happen in silence. The most deep and profound teachings happen in silence. And so I happened to be sitting in the front row of the seating at our aspiration ground. And Sri Chinmoy was near the entranceway. And so he was very close to me, maybe 3 or 4 meters away, and he was talking to this person. And this person had not practiced meditation before. And so Sri Chinmoy simply said to her, just look at me and focus on me, and I will concentrate on you, and I will teach you to meditate in silence. And so at this moment, there was this amazing moment, and Sri Chinmoy was looking in my direction, so I could see him very clearly. But it was the most amazing way of teaching someone to meditate, where there was no words being said. He wasn't explaining to her how to transform consciousness. He was showing her. He was showing how it was done. He was embodying the teaching. So the teaching went from words and abstract ideas to incredibly real, lived experience. And just for my own humanness, just watching this, I was so amazed. And my consciousness changed. I felt like, wow, that's really what meditation is. It was like this moment, it was like a flick of a switch, and his consciousness went into the depths. It went up to the highest heights, and you could feel it. You could feel that that's truly
something shifted. And
that's what meditation is.
Yeah.
It was so simple. It was beyond words. He did not say anything.
Yeah.
But he simply demonstrated it, and it was. And I think that's one of the most powerful lessons that we can get about changing the world, because very often we're trying to convince people. We're trying to explain things to people. But really the most powerful way that we can transform the world is the example of how we live our lives.
Yeah.
If we can put ourselves in our best possible states of consciousness and bring forward all of our divinity and our best qualities and minimize our cardinal sins,
our imperfections,
the way we miss the targets, we will go through the world and people will experience something and say, wow, like when I talked with this gentleman, I felt something different. There was something, he was living from a different place than I'm experiencing in reality.
There was an interesting story I'm reminded of where Sri Chinmoy had all the people who gave meditation classes come up.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and he looked at them and he kind of like looked at them for a while, pondered at them, and kind of started musing and said, so you people think you're teaching meditation? And then he paused and looked at them, and everybody was like expecting some praise or something. He shook his head. He said, no, their souls are teaching them how to meditate. Their souls are teaching them how to meditate.
Yeah.
So it is not actually we who are teaching others. It's a really good, I think, way to think of ourselves. Also, it makes us more humble, right?
Yeah.
We're not like bringing this knowledge, and we're the great teachers teaching, but their own souls actually teach them how to meditate. We just provide the atmosphere, you could say. We provide the circumstances, the information.
We rented the room.
We rented the room. That's a very good way to think of it. Yes.
Yeah, and that's really powerful, because that's what you want to give people. You want to give them agency over their own consciousness. If they feel that they need somehow someone outside of them to transform their life, they're always going to be at risk of being let down or disappointed.
But then just a while ago, we said we need somebody transcendent to help us. Or is that only for addiction? When we're in that.
So this is the thing. When we are relying on that part of ourselves, that is not the part of ourselves that's creating our problems.
Right.
Like our problems are coming from our ego. Our ego and our minds are creating the imperfections. And so when we're trying to transcend them, we need to connect with something transcendent,
beyond ourselves, beyond our ego.
But it's beyond that limited part of the self.
Yeah.
And so when we contact our own soul, or the deepest part of our being, that is not who we normally experience life.
Yeah.
Like I think very few people on earth know their own souls, which is a wild thing, because this is who we truly are. This is when we leave this earthly world, we leave behind our mind, we leave behind our physical body, we leave behind our vital, we leave behind all of these parts of our being, and we return to our true self. But when we are on earth here, we're normally so invested in the story of who we are with our mind and our body and our vital and all of these parts of our being. But it's a complete show. It's a complete drama. This is the character. It's as though when you walked off stage and you'd finished your performance and you went back into the green room and you were there with Vishnu and Shiva, and you're like, wow, that was a show.
And all your friends and all your enemies are there.
But if you walked off the stage and still thought you were the character that you were playing on the stage here, like all of the other, the divine, the souls would find it so funny that you really thought that was
your mask.
You really thought that was you.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a beautiful thing, that so often we take it so seriously, the problems and our imperfections, and we feel as though there's some great strife and some great problem that we have to deal with. When in fact, they are the lessons, they are the teachers.
Yeah.
It's our own imperfections. It's like there's a great saying: the obstacle is the way.
Right.
The obstacle is not the thing that stops us getting to the goal. We often see, oh, I'm trying to get to this goal, and oh God, there's all these obstacles in the way. The obstacle is the way, because each obstacle we overcome teaches us the particular lesson that we need to learn.
Yeah, I'm reminded of an aphorism by Sri Chinmoy, which I really love. And he said, just let me think of it. He said, self-mastery and God discovery are the only two things that each human being on earth must take seriously. Everything else can be taken lightly.
Yeah.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
Self-mastery and God discovery. Like, that's the essence that we should take seriously. And everything else is part of the game. It's part of the divine drama.
Yeah, and I think those two things in some way are the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's like our self-mastery is a God discovery. It's like we talked about, that self-giving is self-discovery, is God becoming. It's like we realize who we truly are by our self-giving, our mastery of the game of life, and our giving ourselves fully to it. So yeah, that's really beautiful. I'm really pleased that you remembered that one.
Did you have any stories to tell connected to these imperfections? Because it's always nice to hear these things played out in real life with a story.
Yeah, so I mean, I've definitely got some examples that I was thinking about here, and one of the most common ones I've seen is the quality of avarice, which is that love of money, or we can say it's the focus on preparing for some unreal reality in the future, some unreal future.
Yeah.
And so I see that a lot because I'm at this point in my life, I'm turning 45 soon. And so I've seen a lot of people that I know who've been playing the spiritual game and practicing the spiritual game very seriously for many years of their life, and they've been making great progress in many ways. But I do remember seeing a brother of mine and a good friend who, at some point at this point in his life, he started to think about his retirement. He started to look around and think, "Oh my God, I don't have that many years of my working life left. I need to start taking this really seriously. I need to start preparing for my retirement and putting aside money." And so his focus went from being in the here and now. So the spiritual game is always happening in the here and now. And so suddenly his aim and his focus started to change, and he started to be looking 20 years down the road when he's going to be retiring. And he was starting to think how much money he needs to put aside and where he'll live and what he'll do and all of these things. So he was constantly being pulled out away from the present moment, just because of the way he was thinking about the world. So this wrong way of seeing the world. Because when you're doing that, obviously you're not putting your faith in the universe to provide for you.
I think many people are in that state. Millions, countless millions of people are planning their retirement.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but what it tends to do is over time, what happened was he looked around the people around him who were practicing the spiritual game really seriously, and he started judging them from the point of view of of the game he was playing. So he had changed the game he was playing. And that's the thing, when you judge someone else, you've got to remember, we're not playing the same game. So if I'm playing a particular type of game and he's playing a different game, my judgments are going to be all wrong, because I'll be looking at him from the point of view of what I value, what I think is important, what I am aiming my time and energy towards. And so if I'm putting all my time and energy towards preparing for my retirement, and I see some spiritual man who's living in the here and now, he's like not a care in the world for where he'll live, and he just simply has faith that he'll be taken care of.
Yeah.
I will find that so annoying. I'll be like, what is wrong with this person? He is not taking life seriously, because I'm judging him from the perspective of the game I'm playing.
It's just not the game of self-realization and self.
No, exactly. And these things happen very insidiously. Like your imperfections can cloud your judgment very slowly over time. And very often they come from the unconscious part of our being, or from the hidden part of our being, which we could call the shadow part of our being. All of the ideas, because the shadow part of our being is the unconscious part of our being. It's not in our conscious awareness. And we kind of hide a lot of things in there. We kind of push all of these things down. So any experiences or parts of our being that we've seen, or perhaps we don't want to look at, we push that down there. But it also is hidden down there is all of the ideas that your culture has given you. And like I said in a previous episode, that nature abhors a vacuum. And so anyone who believes they don't believe anything is completely misguided. They believe a huge amount of ideas that you need to operate in the world.
Who said that nature abhors a vacuum?
So this is an idea in science.
Oh, okay.
It's that if in nature we create a vacuum, as soon as nature can, it will rush to fill that space. So if we create a space without anything in it, a vacuum, as soon as we open that up, reality will rush in and fill it up. So with air, with oxygen, and all of the different gases. But it's the same in any space. If there's a vacuum there, nature will immediately try and fill it as quickly.
So how does that translate to our human lives?
And so if we think that we somehow exist without beliefs, that I don't believe anything, you can't exist without a belief system. You can't exist in this world without a belief system. So if you don't choose and create your own belief system, you will be given one by your culture, because your culture is constantly telling you, value this, value that. You should do this, you should do that. And then that's also the dangerous thing when we look around the world, is where we ourselves are taking part in that game. We're constantly trying to make other people act in the way that we think they should act. And so we all see that. And sometimes that's the hardest thing with our families, is in many families, it's your own family members who are pushing and pulling at you, trying to make you think and act in different ways. And so that's often why people run into so much strife and troubles with their family members, is because of that those types of relationships where we think we really love you, so we're going to tell you how you should act.
It's like the mother who wants her son to be a lawyer or a doctor, and the son wants to be something different. There's a very ancient story of tension and strife.
And it's when we're too attached to them and we are judging them by the game we're playing, and we're not giving them the space to play the game as it appears to them. Because that's the thing, no one can understand exactly what I see, and I can't understand exactly what anyone else is seeing. And so for me to be able to truly think I know how that person should be acting is just foolishness. It's total foolishness on my behalf. And what I always like to think as well is any one particular person's actions here and now in this particular moment, there is an infinite number of experiences I've had throughout countless lifetimes, according to the idea of reincarnation, that has led to them being exactly who they are in this exact moment. And it's in some ways, I can't expect them to act any other way, because I don't see all of the hidden, invisible forces and the experiences they've had, the infinite number of experiences that have led to them seeing the world in a particular way, which is going to lead to them acting in a particular way. And so I can never feel as though that I should judge anyone else how they're acting. It's just, I simply want to love and accept them for who they are in this moment. And sometimes people will come to you or come to me or come to someone else, and they will admit, I have a problem. There is something I'm seeing wrong. Can you help me see it correctly? But if I come in from my own pride and my own ego and say, oh, I can see exactly what you're doing wrong, they're not ready, because they can't see it. And then people tend to, if you try and point out to something to someone that's invisible to them, they will normally always fight back. They will resist you like anything, because if you're saying, oh, did you know that you really are suffering from jealousy at the moment? If you just came to someone...
Well, that is one of the hardest ones to admit for people, jealousy somehow. Somehow that one is really tough.
That is.
Because it's a very backward quality. It's like you want to stab the other person secretly. But everybody's favorite imperfection is, we talked about this, perfectionism. My worst quality, I'm such a perfectionist. Like, I could do with less perfectionism.
That for me is so amusing. And if I ever heard someone really say that, because I've seen that in different skits and different things, like with a job interview. Where someone, can you tell us about your worst qualities? Yes. I'm a true perfectionist. That's
another good one is micromanagement.
Oh yes,
because that's also a hidden really good quality, because you're really paying attention to detail. So I micromanage, and I'm a perfectionist.
And so those people, I would say, they are blind and they're deluded. Their own true imperfections are hiding from them.
But they are hiding from us. I mean, it is hard to see them.
And that would be the case where Sri Chinmoy said, when you're in your mind, You either see no imperfections,
Mm.
or you feel that you can somehow manage your life with your imperfections.
And so what is this one?
So this one is the crocodile.
Okay.
This one is the crocodile living in the room with you.
We talked about this earlier, right?
And yeah, and
The
so
pet crocodile.
and so this is the idea where your desires or your imperfections or your problems, first of all, you think, oh, are they really that bad? Like it's such a small thing. And you start to feed them. You start to indulge just a little bit of envy, just a little bit of gluttony here and there. And you start to feed it just little snacks. And that's all it's requiring. But over time, it's growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's taking more and more of your time and energy to feed this crocodile. And so this is the situation where you somehow thought you could deal with the crocodile, but at some point you realize the crocodile controls you. You're not controlling the crocodile.
That's it. So it's like addiction. I have to think about right away.
Yeah.
Well, that's what when we brought it up first, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so there's many different ways that can manifest itself in your life. But it's every time you're feeding the wrong part of yourself, you're feeding this crocodile that's existing somewhere in the dark parts of your being.
Mm-hmm.
And you think in the beginning that what's a little bit of jealousy or insecurity or fear or worry, but all you're doing is strengthening it. So each time that you indulge in it, it becomes stronger.
Yeah.
And so really, really pay attention to yourself. Pay attention to yourself.
Yeah.
Constantly through your practice, through your day, and then even looking back, just giving your conscience a chance to say, okay, where did I err today? Where did I go wrong? Where did I miss the target? And the more you can do that and the more you can play that game, because I think a lot of people spend a lot of time hiding these things from themselves, ignoring them, just not wanting to see them. And so the more time you spend and the longer you've done that before, the more painful it is when you reveal these things to yourself. And one of the big parts of the 12-step program we were talking about is at some point you have to go and make amends. You have to go to all of the people that you have wronged and you've got to ask for their forgiveness. And it's an incredibly humbling experience to have to contact people that maybe you haven't seen for years, maybe you haven't talked to, and you have to say, many years ago, I suffered from this problem. And because of that, I treated you wrong. I did you wrong. I was difficult to be around, and you have to ask for their forgiveness. And it doesn't matter if they forgive you or not. That's not the most important thing. It's you taking those steps to acknowledge all of the harm you've caused.
Wow.
And so the longer we live in a space of delusion and the longer we live in a place of wrong thinking and wrong acting, the more harm we're causing in the world around us. So I don't want to alarm anyone, but the quicker or the sooner you can start to really humble yourself, to put yourself in a position where you really are open to seeing these parts of yourself. It's not seeing them as some terrible thing that should be hidden away in the unconscious, because all you're doing is allowing it to exist in the darkness, and you're feeding it in the darkness. It's like bring it into the open. It's like start to see these parts of yourself. And one of my friends just the other day as well, he pointed out these imperfections are things that give you character.
Oh, yes.
They make you interesting.
Yeah.
And very often we see that in the view of, if we watch not a documentary, sorry, but a film about the life of someone like the Buddha or the Christ. But especially I know from a personal example from the series of the Buddha. The Buddha was a great character until he became the Buddha.
Mm.
And when he became the Buddha, people have this idea that when you become in some way realized or a holy person, you lose all of your character. You become this really
Bland person
without any character or any interesting parts to your being. Yeah. But the Indians have a much different perspective on that. And there's many people in spiritual traditions in India, when they talk about the guru or the master, they'll say, oh yes, the master, he still smokes the hookah every evening. And for someone who's a novice or is coming, like, what? I thought the master was realized. Like, why does he still smoke the hookah every night? It's like, oh, if he didn't do that, he would just float away. He needs to keep a connection here with the earth plane. And for me, I was very lucky to visit Dakshineshwar, which was where Sri Ramakrishna was the priest at the Kali temple there. And every evening at 7:00, you can go and sit in his bedroom, and they bring the hookah out, set up, ready for him to smoke it. And there's something wonderful about that tradition carrying on. But you hear it with many different Indian masters that they would still, many centuries ago, people would sniff arsenic. And so there's the great stories about the master sending the disciple into town to get some arsenic for them to sniff.
Yeah.
And it would help them keep warm when they were living in the caves and, in these inhospitable climates.
Just to make sure it's not drugs, right? They were not on drugs.
Yeah. But it was that they're keeping some connection to the human world.
Yeah.
And then some teachers would say as well, this is why I still, act as though I'm angry. I still have a temper. Yeah. Because I need to show you people I'm still here on earth with you. I'm still a human being.
Yes, Sri Aurobindo said in one of his poems, he reached the highest heights of realization and then screamed because dinner wasn't ready.
Yeah.
And then the master says, it's the belly's hungry God that was screaming.
It's so good because that's what you want to see. And I think that's what we get wrong about realized beings, because I've been very lucky to have visited different places where different realized souls have existed. And in each place, it's not this bland, uniform consciousness that's somehow completely lacking in any sense of personality or uniqueness or character. Each of those places, if you go to Ramana Maharshi's ashram, you'll find this incredible sweetness there. Mm-hmm. And you go to Sri Ramakrishna's bedroom, and you find this incredible intensity and power there. And you go to Sri Chinmoy's aspiration ground, and you feel this joyous creativity and constant newness and constant inspiration. And so these are all realized masters, have all attained the highest heights of consciousness. But for each of them, it was unique and personal, and it represented their own unique personal soul. And it's beautiful. And that's what I want to think, that one day when I visit the next realized master, that his consciousness will be completely uniquely his. And when I achieve that state, I want mine to be uniquely mine and yours to be uniquely yours. You want to think that it's not something that you step into and it's like the drop and you become the ocean and you lose yourself. It's like you don't lose yourself, you gain the ocean. You don't lose the uniqueness of yourself, but you gain the power and the capacity of the ocean. Yeah. But you still have character. You're not.
Well, we experienced Sri Chinmoy when he was still here on earth with us for a number of years, and he was an absolutely very, very strong personality in the sense that he had a really beautiful personality, very, very warm and loving and caring, but unique and very, very, very unique, let's say, and the opposite of bland, I would say.
Yeah. So if you want to find what your true personality is, your true nature, it is beyond your delusions. It's beyond your imperfections. Your imperfections have some way of making some sort of an imprint, and they're the obstacles that you have uniquely chosen to face up to transcend. But all of those things build character. They make you the unique being, spiritual being here, having a human experience. They all make an imprint on you. And then when you go beyond all of those, it doesn't mean that you've lost your humanity. It's like you've gained your divinity, but you still have all of this wonderful empathy and all of this deep, profound understanding of the deep difficulties and tragedy of the human game.
A very good place to end, I think, for today. And we have come to you actually from New York City. So last episode you were here and I was still in Amsterdam. Now we're both here on our retreat.
And it's wonderful to be in the same room with you and talking with you.
It is great. And we'll maybe do another one.
Yes, I hope so.
In a few days. So stay tuned and thank you for watching and listening. And if you enjoy this podcast, please consider subscribing, leave a review or tell a friend. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.